This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Grief BeLIEF. Now, if you're looking at the screen, if you're watching us on YouTube, you'll notice the screen looks a little different today. Well, Alice and I are both here. Three of our members are either in airplanes someplace or in foreign countries, and one is at home feeling a little under the weather today. However, they're going to miss out because our guest today is Michael Gershe, and Michael has been on New Cleveland Radio in the past because I read his book. Now, let me see if I can put it up there. There we go. The Magic of Life. Now, I'm going to ask all of you, when this is over, I want you all to go out to Amazon and buy the book. Because, yeah, we got to support Michael a little bit. But the reason I want you to buy the book, it's sad, it's funny, it's real. And, you know, we talk about that on this podcast every month. None of us are going to get out of life without experiencing some sort of grief. And Michael, I'm going to let you tell your story, but I had somebody ask me after we did a number of podcasts together, how come Michael grieved over his mother? He never met her. And that just like shocked me. It's like, that's probably the biggest reason that you've experienced grief. So tell us a little bit about who you are and what happened and how you got to be where you are.
Sure. And likely reason that they're all traveling or they're sick once I'm on the show, of course. Yeah. I see how it is to the other ones. It's fine. That's a very interesting question. And I'm sure they meant it in a good place, but I feel kind of offended by it.
Because, so did I.
We all know people say things in grief to make themselves feel better than anything else, right? And no disrespect to them, and I get that. So, but God, grief and trauma has been part of my life since I was 8 weeks old. So for those people who don't know the story or haven't read the book yet, when I was 8 weeks old, my father was driving us home from Long Island into Spring Valley, New York, and it was around 11 o'clock at night. My mom was next to my dad in the front middle seat. This is back in 1970, so cars were a little bit different back then.
Right.
So my mom was next to him in the front middle. I was next to my mom in a little baby carrier. Again, 1970, no car seats, right? And my brother, who was 3, was sleeping in the back seat, not wearing a seatbelt because we couldn't find him in the 70s. And it was, we had the red light as our light turned green. And my father started to go through the intersection. A drunk driver plowed through the intersection and T-boned the car. And the force of the impact was so great, it pushed our car into a telephone pole and split the car all the way up to the dashboard. And it also totaled the cars. And this is back when they built cars to last, not like today where, a shopping cart could do $10,000 worth of damage, to your car. So when the first responders arrived, they found my father, my brother, and my mother. They didn't find me because they didn't know I was in the car. Someone told them. It happened to be my aunt, my mom's sister, her brother-in-law, who lived around the intersection, told the first responders, someone's missing. So they found me like 10, 15 minutes later, sandwiched between the door and the dash of the car. The 4 of us were taken to the hospital. My brother didn't have a scratch on him. My father had to get stitches on his face from the windshield hitting his face. My mom was taken into surgery. And as for me, nearly every bone in my body was broken. My skull was completely fractured from one side of my head to the other. So the fact I am 53 years old and joining you tonight is nothing short of a miracle. And I had to be life flighted to another hospital because my injuries were so severe. My aunt lost count of how many blood transfusions I received. And the doctors were telling my dad, hey, your infant son is touch and go. We don't know if he's going to survive. And my mom was fighting for her life. Unfortunately, my mom passed away due to her injuries. You take any one of those situations for my dad, it's horrible enough, but my dad had to deal with both those things. they couldn't put me in a cast. They didn't know, so they had to strap me down because I was all cartilage. They had to strap me down on a special board until I could sort of heal. And I had to go back for months afterwards to make sure I didn't have any brain damage. And as Karen could attest, I'm perfectly okay. Some of my friends would say, well, he's a little bit off. Whatever. They're so judgmental. And I grew up to be a competitive swimmer. I'm a comedian, an author, speaker, but yeah, my mom died when I was 8 weeks old. I had 8 weeks with her when a drunk driver took that away. I know I never had a chance. I didn't have, a chance to run home from school and say, hey, mom, look what I drew for you. Or, hey, mom, what's for dinner? Or, hey, mom, 3 simple words. I love you. The word mom has no emotion. It has no meaning. It's no different than the word the, really. And I've been grieving, my entire life. And, when I was a kid, you start getting there. You you're different because you don't, every school form, mother's name, deceased. No one asked why. And as a kid, how do you process that? Even now, when schools have, school shootings, which I can't even, wrap my head around. What do they do? Grief counselors go in. Didn't have that. I was a swimmer, right? You just, my dad's doing the best he could to raise us. I was raised by a wonderful woman named Dolly, who's a Jamaican lady who came into our house, sort of a part-time job, but turned into a lifetime. In fact, I just spoke to her before this. She's 92 years old, and I'll be home for Christmas. And she was pretty happy about that. But she raised me and my brother as her own flesh and blood, along with my father. And, it was supposed to be, just look after my brother and myself. And, we're talking 53 years later, it turned into a motherhood role. You don't find people like that a lot. But to grieve for my mother, you knew something was wrong. You look at other families, it's like, okay, ours is a little bit different. You have 3 white guys and a black woman, right? And you get older, but then for me, it was normal though, because Dolly stayed in my room when she was there. So she's all I've known.
Right.
But there is that piece missing, of mother, right? I have Dolly, but where's, my mom? And it wasn't until my dad passed away, my aunt passed away in 2018, when grief and trauma almost took me, and I asked for help. And the first question my counselor asked was, hey, let's talk about your mother's death and how that impacted your life and all your relationships. And I was like, I'm not here to talk about that. It's like, yeah, you are. Because I wanted to talk about my dad and my aunt, but I was 47 years old. And now for the very first time, processing and dealing with my mother's death. But it's every day, and we all know it. You don't escape it. You don't leave it behind. It doesn't stay at home when you go out to work. It's with you every day. And yeah, as much as grateful I am to have Dolly in my life, you still know there's a part that I never experienced at the hands of a drunk driver.
And and I think, Allison, you'll agree, grief doesn't have a specific look to it. So it's not just because, hey, you knew your mother and you had her in your life like you had your father. When your father died, that was a different type of a grief for you, I'm sure, because each person has a different meaning to all of us. And for that person who made that comment to me, it's like, let's stop judging each other. In fact, I love the fact, Michael, that every year, right around the date of your mother's passing, you bring it out to the open. And I think it's important for you, but I think it's important for your friends to understand that, you know what, even 47 years later, you're grieving, and it's okay.
Yeah, it's it's every day now. It's 53 years, right? But I think it is, because I've dedicated my life to try and prevent other people going through what my family has gone through. So I do, I've spoken at colleges, high schools, military bases. I talk to DUI offenders here locally in Ohio. In fact, I have one program Thursday, because I don't want other families to go through what we went through. and it happens every day. It's something that's preventable. It makes me mad. It makes me sad. And all those emotions, right? It's maybe so frustrated where I want to quit, but then if I quit, then I can't make a difference, right? And if I could do it with humor, then it works out, because you take the pain. Luckily, I've been able to take the pain and the hurt and use my warped sense of humor to channel it. Humor has always been my defense mechanism, and it's also a healthy way to deal with trauma and grief. Because we all know I could have crawled into a bottle my entire life, could have self-abused, could have done all that stuff to harm myself. I don't think my mother would want that for me. My dad, Dolly, it's not how I was raised. It's very simple to go ahead and do that. And sometimes it's hard to put on a good face and we all know this. And yeah, the anniversary, you have the ups and downs, but I think I do it to maybe change people's lives. But also, I found out through grief counseling and where I was, it's also that support and kind of go, okay, I have people that I could turn to when I feel I'm in the gutter. And that part's nice, where a lot of times people think we're despair and we don't have people who can help us. And after I wrote the book and I had family members who knew me my entire life said, we never had any idea you were that bad. And what happens during grief, we hide, right? We cover that up. And when people unfortunately commit suicide, no one knows how bad they're hurting. And going through counseling allowed me to face the depression, the grief, all that stuff, and to talk about it. Instead of it owning me, I own it. And I learned tools to how to combat it. And talking about grief, talking about men and how we deal with grief and trauma has been so freeing of it. I'm just happy to be here to be able to share my story, and I'm grateful for the opportunity, because what you're doing, what we're doing is helping other people
Absolutely.
to realize that they can get help, and there is hope for anyone.
So Allison, you turned to grief coaching because of your situation, correct?
Yeah, I wanted actually to speak to a few things that Michael had said that I thought were really important, and then I'll talk a little bit about my, how I turned to what I'm doing. But in sharing different experiences of grief, and this is part of why Karen pulled us together to do this, it makes it safe for other people to know that this is not unusual. This is normal. When you grieve the loss of a mom so young from a drunk driver, even not knowing your mom beyond that time can have somebody else go, oh my gosh, that happened to me. And so this is a real experience, and I am not weird. This is normal. I mean, normal in a weird way, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing that I wanted to say is that how smart your counselor was to say that you were there to talk about your mom when you thought you were there about your dad and your aunt, because one of the things that's very remarkable is the snowball effect of grief. That things, it compounds, so it can tap into older griefs. So I lost my brother when I was 25 and he was 23. I lost my my husband in 2016 after being together for 25 years. But I've lost other people along the way, and each hooks into the other one, those feelings, and snowballs them. And so one of the reasons that we have grief belief is how important it is to not just stuff that stuff down. Because when you stuff that stuff down and the next grief hits, it's bad. And it can be bad to the level of suicide, extreme depression. It can be bad in a way that really destroys lives.
And that's where I was, because I was done. I had a plan and everything after, those two deaths. I had my aunt, my grandmother passed away when I was like 8 or 9. My grandfather, 24. My best friend John, who died as a result of being the drunk driver when I was 33. And then I emulated what my dad did. So he was my role model for grief. He hit it, different generations, right? Never talking about my mom. Even on December 19th, 2012, he sent me and my brother an email, which would have been their 48th wedding anniversary. And he said, even today, it was still too hard to talk about. And I used to be, as a kid, even an adult, I wish my dad would talk about it, not realizing he couldn't. And then when he died and my aunt died 90 days apart, and you're thinking despair, and you went, I can't, how do I go on? And then one of the reasons why I couldn't do it was I couldn't send my brother, Dolly, other family members back to the cemetery 3 times in 6 months.
Right.
Call it Jewish guilt too. But I didn't want my friends saying, why didn't he ask for help? And we all have seen people, when their friends do that, we ask ourselves why. And I didn't want to do that to people that I cared about. I was going to fight. I've been a fighter all those years, and I went, I got to change the narrative. I can't keep doing this. And my counselor knew me. She was a good friend of mine. So she knew what buttons to push right away. And I think we all know, it takes 12, 20 visits with a new counselor before you dive that deep. But man, she went right after it the first day, and I was cursing her in a way, but she was right. She was 100% correct, because even though I talked about it on stage and stuff, we never did the deep dive. And it did impact all my relationships, because I saw what my father went through, and I never wanted to experience that pain. I already had enough pain with my mother dying. I didn't want to be with someone and have her die, so that's one of the things. Also, being a comedian, going after my dreams and goals was the other part of the equation. Of not really you date and stuff, but I would find ways to sabotage relationships and something I'm not worthy, and all those type of things. But mostly it was not wanting to go through what my father went through.
Well, you and I have that in common, actually, because when my husband was dying, pancreatic cancer, took 11 months. I had always wanted it really elevates what matters. So what's really important rises up, because when life is short, because these things are happening and you're grieving them, then what are you waiting for to get to what you're meant to be getting to? And one of the things I had always wanted was to sing in cabaret shows. And so while my husband was dying, I was in 2 cabaret shows. And the songs that I chose in those shows were to remind myself that I wasn't just a caregiver, and I wasn't, just the wife of a man who was probably going to die and leave me after 25 years. And so I shared, by the songs I chose and the pattern I used, what was going on in a way that you use humor, I used song. And my intent was to have people feel, like just really feel, and be so honest that it was safe for them to do that. So that was kind of my saving grace, because I have gone through hard times in my life where I did not sing and I did not write, and I was very unhealthy. The other thing that I wanted to ask you about further, and probably all of us, grief is a very ungrounded experience. It's like suddenly you're not going along in life in the same pace as anybody else. So it feels, or it felt to me, let me just speak for myself, like being very untethered from everything. Like, why am I here? Everyone else is going faster. They care about things I no longer care about. It was like that. So I guess the question I ask, and I would ask you and ask Karen, is how do you tether when you feel untethered to people, to life?
It's a very good question. I don't know. I think about my relationships with people, my close friends,
Mm-hmm.
and that helps. I mean, I know they keep me grounded pretty well, but I go back to my mother sacrificed her life so I could live, and not to do anything stupid. Anything to jeopardize my life. Even when you find those times. So, and also my father. It's still. I don't want to disappoint my parents. I don't want to
Yeah.
disappoint my friends. So, find a way to feel grounded. Go out and do photography, which grounds me. Hike, watch a movie, do something I enjoy, those type of things. But I think about the people that I would hurt if I took my own life, and that keeps me
Yeah.
grounded. It goes back to Dolly, my brother, because we've been through enough grief. Even my close friends, when we lost John, they know what it's like. I don't want them to feel that pain and trauma all over again. So
you
those
also,
are the things I try to stay focused on.
you do a lot for all of us who are connected to you. Your postings, whether it be your photography, some wisecrack that you put out on Facebook.
That's every day almost.
Yeah. But I look forward to those things because number one, I can sort of take your temperature as to, is Michael doing okay today or not? Not that I necessarily can do anything for you, but to sort of like keep watching. Okay. And I do the same thing. And I've had some friends say to me, why do you put it all out there? Well, that's what grounds me. That's what keeps me safe. This past weekend, when my son left to go back to Texas, I know I'm going to see him in 30 days. Let me tell you, Sunday was a grieving day for me because he had come back home. He was in the house. He was eating meals with us. And it was like, now he's gone again. And I knew in the back of my mind, everything really is okay. But I still was fighting it. And so when I put it out there, it's like, yeah, I'm grieving. Thank God he's alive. He's well. He's doing fine. But you know what? I'm sitting here crying. And I had some people who said to me, well, it could be worse. And it's like, I understand that. It could be worse. But this is the worst it is right now. And
Yeah.
that's what I see you doing as well.
Yeah, and I do think that sharing is a type of service. So I really was pretty open when my husband was dying. And then after he died, I really fell down into a pit of despair. And I started coaching actually because I told myself this pain must serve. This pain must serve something beyond being so devastating that I could barely stay alive. And I literally had my husband's hospice medications in my house. And every day I did not take those things was a massive triumph. And I'll be honest, I just moved. They were in the back top of my closet, and I'm getting rid of them this week. And it's been 7 years. But, and there are a lot of them, I mean, I really was at risk. And every day that I didn't take that action was a red banner day for me. Was that a healthy thing to do? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But for some reason, it reminded me that I was resilient. Like that act. And I am glad that I'm going to dump them tomorrow. Finally. But as I went through my grief, and you have both probably experienced this, everything went wrong at different moments in time. Relationships, finances, health, everything fell apart. And so I started observing myself like I was a lab rat. Okay, well, what solves for this? And then I started sharing it. And so my coaching came out of all these things went wrong. How can I use my own experience and my own solutions to help other people going through it too? And when you're sharing and posting, there's a lot of, I don't know if you guys find this, but there's a lot of like stealth watchers.
Oh,
They
yeah.
watch and watch and watch and watch and watch. And then there comes a moment when you say something that lands for them. And then they go, oh my gosh, I've been watching you for 2 years, 6 months, 2 weeks. And what you said just made it safe to feel.
So, Michael, when you're talking at the Stowe courthouse and some of the other courthouses that you've gone to, you're talking to people who have been part of the drunk driving scene. Does that help you, or do you feel like you're helping them, or is it a combination?
Oh, it's 100% both. Because I never thought I never thought I would ever speak in front of that audience, because you have that anger, right? It's like, well, how dare, you're the enemy. You did this to me. You caused my life. And it's been a healing process for me. I will never forget. I've been doing it for 10 years, and I will never forget the very first comment I got. I was walking outside afterwards, and a 19-year-old girl stopped me and said, "Thank you for making me realize my son needs me more than alcohol." And I think if you could share your story and help other people, then we're doing something right in life. And I think that's what it's about. And I learned that through Dolly, unconditional love. If I didn't have her, would I still be angry? Yeah. I mean, angry, you say mad, the drunk driver is going to win, and it's a crappy way to live. I've been angry. I still am at times, but I couldn't be angry at those people. They didn't do anything to me.
Right.
And the overall message was come out, use humor and just share my story. And I think if you could share your story, from a non-threatening way, but with compassion and unconditional love, it resonates with people, right? But it's helped me in so many ways, because then you see them as parents, you see them as husbands, wives, sometimes they're 19, 20 years old, college students. You see them for them instead of they are drunk drivers, right? And then you have that label, and it humanizes us. So when they come up afterwards, they want to give you a hug, a handshake, buy a book, whatever it is. It's really helped me channel some of that anger too, some of those emotions, and it's made me a better person. So yeah, it's definitely both, in terms of that process. And I never thought it was an audience I would ever speak in front of, and I've been blessed to do it, which sounds kind of weird, but we all know there are certain programs by people who belong to MAD. They're angry, they're bitter, and I get that, right? I've also been doing it for my entire life. So, and the way we present it, and I've been doing it for so long, was with the humor and doing it differently. Because we all know if you're sitting in a program, this person's yelling at you, whatever it is, you're going to turn that off within 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So I don't come from a place like that. Even though sometimes you want to shake them and go, stop doing it, they're not going to listen. They already, and so I think it comes from that different place. And that's why I've been doing it for 10 years. It's been very successful. It's changed, people's lives. But I think most importantly, mine. I mean, their life is great too, but my life, it's really good for myself. And just like counseling, I'm a different person because of that. And when you can improve yourself, I think that's a good thing.
You know, you mentioned in your book, and I'm going to tell everybody it's right around page 170, but you talked about your friends that you were really close with, and you all had lost a parent.
Oh, yeah.
Did you come together because of that, or did you become friends and then all of a sudden realize what you had in common?
Well, in college, Sean and I were teammates. I think I think the circumstances made us become friends first, and then you get to know people, right? So Sean and I were teammates, and then you learn about them. And then same thing with Big John, who lived across the hall from us. Proximity was one thing, and then you get to learn. And I think that made our bond between Sean and John and myself tighter, because we knew what that grief and trauma was like. Even though we were 18, 19, we didn't have a handle on it. Sometimes we still may not have a handle on it, but that was a bond that I think the three of us had. Even though I had Dolly, Sean, some of the men that his mom dated, especially one person, was very horrible. So his situation was abusive in a way with that guy. But John just had his mom. But we all knew the loss of a parent. So I think that bonded us a bit more than the other ones.
Do you think it's because, so I'm a widow and I wind up in a lot of widows groups. And part of it is because you don't have to explain what the experience is like to people who don't get it. They're trying, but they have no idea. And in fact, until you go through something like this, you don't actually know what it's like in the raw, in the bones.
Right. Yeah, it's right, because you get empathize and sympathize with another widow, or is that the right one? Yeah. And
Yep,
it's
widow,
just like when I
widower.
meet people who lose their loved ones due to a drunk driver, you have that same experience. You understand that type of grief and anger. I mean, it's still a little bit different, but the catalyst was it, right? So we know that pain caused by someone who's impaired, and you get angry because it's all preventable, right? And you want to reach out and just work with that person, but you also have to let them go and go through the channels, themselves, which sucks in a way because you want to prevent them from the deep, dark abysses. But I think we all know that's just part of the grief process, and you hope that you could be a resource to help pull them out when they need it. And I think that's very important to be, and that's what writing the book has helped. I met many people I don't even know who said the book helped them. I met this past weekend at the comedy club people that read the book who came back and said how much it helped them, and that leaves me speechless, which sometimes isn't always easy to do, but it does, because all you can say is thank you. But man, to have that impact, as we all know, in someone, to change them is remarkable. And you kind of go, I'm just a kid from Miami, Florida, a smart aleck kid, but then your story, or anyone's story, if you're willing to share it, do it. And I think you're right. I mean, you may go to those groups and you get it, but still your grief is different than that person over there, right? But the cause is there, but the relationship with your husband and everything else is different kids and how we cope. And so I think it all comes from reading a book, What Happened to You by Oprah. I was in a book club. Not like I go out and search for Oprah's books, but it was a very good book. And I learned about our trauma from our parents trickle down to us. Ronald Reagan would have been very happy with the trickle down theory of that. And my dad didn't take care of his, so he wasn't healthy. So it goes down to me, and I had to break that cycle. Otherwise, I would still be like him. And so I think you're right in terms of we understand, but it's still our own individual journey.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons after I had Allison on my podcast, had her on Avoid the Maze. As soon as I clicked on end, I thought there's something more here that we need to talk about on a regular basis. And I started realizing that I had connections with other people who either had lost a spouse or estranged from their children, were still mourning over the loss of their parents. I mean, I've had people say to me, Karen, you're so lucky. You had your mother for 66 and a half years. Why is it this year on her 7th anniversary of her death, you're still mourning her? And it's like, whoa. It's because one of those reasons because I did have her for 66 and a half years. Okay.
Yeah.
And I had a relationship. So grief is going to be different. I don't sit here every day and cry. I don't sit here every day and mourn, but there are certain times that I was baking her cookie recipe last week. And as I was baking the cookies, tears, I'm sure, went into the cookie dough. That's okay. We have to start accepting the fact that we do things based on what we know, and grief is always going to be part of our life. And yet, Michael, you can get up and do a comedy act and talking about your grief, and we sit there, nod our heads, and we giggle because you're giving us, a chance to just let it go. And I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. And your tears, that's what made the cookies so good, was their tears. But I don't understand what those people expect you to do. Just lollygog through the anniversary? I mean, come on. I mean, again, they say that so they feel better, not for you, right?
Exactly.
And they learn more and more that God, that makes me upset just listening about that. Going, what's wrong with people? I mean, have they not experienced their own? I don't know. It's weird, but yeah, humor, especially, music, singing, I think it has that emotional attachment. But I know through my experience as a comedian, no matter what I'm going through, I have to leave that at the door. And Karen and I, we both talked about this past week with Israel and all that stuff. And I had a hard week going. And then one of our friends, Charlie Wiener, said, do your job. Just like he was standing here, I could hear his voice. And he was right. And those 4 shows left it at the door. And once you hit on stage, my job is to take people's whatever it is away, including mine. Had 4 really good shows. I was happy with them. And then, because we all need that escape, whatever it is. The healthy escape, hiking, movies, whatever it is, singing, writing, versus drugs, bottles, whatever, harming ourselves. But
one of your buddies got mad at me when I said, but I don't feel like laughing. And his response to me was, go on with your life. And it was like, oh, like I meant it, but I didn't mean it. It was like, I don't feel like laughing, but you're going to probably make me laugh. So, and I was glad that he did that, because Mike Connolly, I mean, he hit it right on the head. Like, keep on going.
Right. And Connolly's another one who's had loss and stuff. And, I think we use humor as a defense mechanism, but also for that, if we can make ourselves laugh, then that helps a little bit with the pain and trauma and everything, even though it's been a hard week and it's going to get harder, with the situation, because we empathize, we sympathize. God, if we didn't feel that pain, God, I mean, that would suck. Right. So it's, it's called being human.
Yeah, and laughter and tears are actually pretty close together. So what I find is grief and joy very often ride together for me. And so it's not unusual for that to happen that way. There's a book called Whirligig by a guy named Pfeiffer, Pfeiffer, about a kid who's a drunk driver and goes into a restorative justice situation with the parents. You might enjoy it because they set him a task to leave the whirligigs that the person that he killed created, 4 of them across the country in places of his own choosing. It was beautiful. It may even be out of print. I got it years and years ago, but it stuck with me. So I have a joke for you. This is the best joke. When my husband died, he was cremated, and so I had ashes, huge box of ashes. I mean, it's amazing how big the box is. And so I would put it in a little vial, like for bath salts, from Bed Bath & Beyond, actually. And I decided that I was going to scatter his ashes anywhere I liked, he liked, or we both liked, or he would have liked. So I carried them around New York and periodically just slithered some ashes out by the Met, by here, by there, because that just entertained me. He would have thought it was hilarious. Anyway, so I was in my group, and one of the guys said, I pulled out my ashes, showed them this vial from Bed Bath & Beyond. And he said, it's the Beyond from Bed Bath & Beyond. I told it very badly. I'm not a comedian, as you can see, but
Okay, it's still, guy, it's still pretty funny though.
it's pretty funny.
Pretty funny.
I mean, and this guy who said it was a really dour guy. I mean, it was a bereavement group. And so that made it even more funny.
Right. Yeah. Timing's everything, delivery, if it's more deadpan. Yeah. All those wonderful things to observe,
Death
and,
jokes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which someone else may go, well, that's kind of insensitive, but we get it because it's funny to us, right? And it helps us in that moment.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you bring that up because we were watching, I believe it was 60 Minutes a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about how cremation is really not the thing anymore. It's you become biodegradable. And
Composting.
that thank you. And my sister-in-law has a photographic, she takes pictures of compost of all kinds. I mean, it's just unbelievable. So I sent her a message saying, so if you compost me, will you take a picture? And luckily she laughed. But my son thought that was very insensitive of me, thinking that I was going to have her take a picture of me and then, my whatever my compost looked like. But those are things that we really do have to talk about. And we do have to smile about them, and we do have to laugh about them because it's all part of living. And the moment that we take that first breath, we are on the way to take our last breath. And, we've got to enjoy life in between. And
Yep.
Yeah, the reason I know this is that my mom now wants to be composted.
oh, okay.
So I actually really know this for a really good reason.
Well, I'm glad we're sort of leaving it on,
I'm very excited about it.
Right, exactly. And if you don't want to be composted, if you want to, do your own burial, that's okay too. But in the meantime, I think little comedy is great for the soul. So are you performing this weekend, Michael, did you say?
No, just this week. Tomorrow I have a guest spot somewhere in Berea. And then Thursday after my court appearance, there's a fundraiser for the arts in Cuyahoga Falls that I'm
Okay.
doing a part of. I just don't know what time. And then Friday I get to see Kiss in Detroit, so I'm happy about that. But then Saturday I'm gonna go, heckle our good friend Basil at the Funny Stop.
Well, and you also get to heckle Tim too. So
Correct.
yeah.
But I just worked this past weekend, so and then I was going to work in December, but I'll be in New York to see Kiss for their final show, so I won't be with Greg and Morton, unfortunately.
Okay.
I only have this week, and then I don't know if anything else pops up, through the rest of the year. I don't know yet.
Well, I'm going to put your Facebook page in the show notes. I want people to follow you, especially to see your photography, which is phenomenal. And you've had a couple of photo shows, and my husband is really jealous because he takes photos and they're still in the camera. So, but hey, do what you like in life and keep smiling. And thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Anytime. I'll be happy to come back with the other people too. They missed out on the fun.
We would
They
love
did.
that.
That would
Okay.
be great.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye now.